Something's beeping at me.
Just letting us know we've started the recording. Sorry.
All right, so do you want to kick us off? Do we have Celestia there?
She's on mute.
I apologize. I was trying to make sure that I'm double cross-checking the slides here, so I had not quite got Tim's in there, but I will get that.
If you don't, I've got a backup plan. I've got the presentation ready on my own.
Okay, I can switch it over to you if we need to, since you've got your slides separate. So, okay, fantastic. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, all of you, for joining. We really appreciate it. Let me go ahead and share my screen out. Okay, are people able to see the presentation?
Yep, that's visible.
Fantastic. All right, well, so earlier this summer, the IIL, the International Institute of Learning, had their 5th annual Agile and Scrum conference. And a few of us from STG were able to attend that. It did end up being a virtual conference instead of an in-person conference. But we wanted to just share with you some of the things that we learned and thoughts and takeaways from the conference. So thank you all for joining, and we hope this is helpful. Just to give a quick overview of our agenda, I'll just give a brief overview of some basic details of the conference itself. And then we'll each go into, so there were 4 of us, we'll have 4 presenters, so Andy Syme, myself, Celestia Garner, David Hogue, and Tim Eversole. And so we will each give you a summary of one of our favorite presentations and the key takeaways we learned from those. Then we'll have just kind of our overall summary thoughts of the conference in general, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. And we'd love to hear from all of you, whether you attended or if you weren't able to attend. If you have any questions on the conference, on anything we presented, or if you attended, any of your thoughts on the conference, and then we'll go ahead and close. So we'll try to keep this to about 45 minutes so that people have time we have, obviously time if there's additional Q&A, or so that people have time to get back to whatever they need to get back to work. So that is the agenda. Any questions?
Let's go.
Okay, let's do it. All right. So the conference itself, let's see, where am I at here? Here's my slides. Okay. The conference itself, like I said, was a virtual conference. Also, I just realized I don't have not that you need to see my face, but I just realized my camera was turned off. Okay, so it was a virtual conference. So they had a really great user interface, by the way. So I did appreciate that the conference UI itself was a virtual conference. You went, it looked like you were in a big open room. And then there were, different doors and areas. There was a reception desk that said resources, and you hovered over and you clicked there and they gave you basic information and access to resources. And there were vendor booths and an exhibition room that you could go in to see different vendors, and then presenters. When you went into the presentations, it had a little visual like you were sitting in a room with a bunch of other people at a conference. So I thought, for being a virtual conference, I thought it was a pretty cool, at least the UI itself of attending. You kind of got a little bit of that conference feel. There were around 5,000 participants this year, which is great. As particularly with it being virtual. So they did a survey last year, the IIL that is, and did some research, and they found actually a survey that had been done by version 1, and they found that about 95% of companies are using some form of Agile, even if it's little bits and pieces here and there. As most of us know who are particularly in the technology field, you know, almost every company does things a little bit differently. Even those who say we're Agile, a lot of people have different variations of that. So anyway, so for the conference theme this year, they decided to focus on how to adopt and scale Agile properly at an enterprise level and down to a team level. So it was a relevant topic, and so really the presentations and particularly keynotes were all around how to adopt and scale Agile for an organization. They had 5 keynote speakers and 15 presentations, so overall there were 20 presentations provided. And each of those were eligible for PDUs for the PMI, so education credits through the PMI, or SEU or CDUs for the Scrum Alliance to recertify as a Scrum Master, CPO, others. So lots of great information in the conference overall. They ended up leaving the conference open from June, when it originally occurred, through the end of December. So even if you weren't able to attend the conference, I believe you can still register and have access to the presentations through the end of December. And I highly recommend it if you didn't. I think it was just over $100, it seems like, something like that. And for the wealth of information that this conference provided, it was well worth it. So that's the summary of the conference itself. Any questions so far on just kind of how the conference went, or any of the other presenters, any thoughts on how the conference was virtually, the virtual conference experience?
Yeah, I certainly enjoyed it being virtual, because usually with a conference you'll have a few days that you get to go, and very often you're making choices between what you attend.
Yeah.
And I have now watched every video that was available. I sucked the marrow out of the bones of this one, and I found valuable things out of each of them, which I very much enjoyed. And I thought it was better by being virtual and available over a long period of time than a short period where I would have to make choices between 2 good things.
Yeah, I agree. I've actually watched a couple of the presentations more than once, especially as we were trying to prepare, and I was trying to figure out, of all of the content that was out there, what to present on. So yeah, it was very well organized, very well run, and it's a super value for what we got.
That's something you can't do in a live conference. I got to watch a video, stop it, rewind. What did they say again? Okay. And it was very handy. And look at the slides over and over. And yes, very handy being virtual.
Great, thanks. Okay, well, let's get into it. First up, Andy Syme is going to give his presentation on the conflict resolution techniques for Agile leaders. That was by Tom Friend. And so I will let Andy take it from here.
Okay. I really enjoyed the presentation from Tom Friend about conflict resolution. One thing that I've noticed while we're working within Agile is that, because very often decisions have to be made quickly and really just at the exact same speed or slightly ahead of the speed of development, that conflict can come to a head, and it kind of spreads across a project. It's not just something that happens at the beginning, we all agree, and then everything is clearer from then on. If we're really sticking to Agile principles, we're going to have things that may lead to conflict all the way through a project. And so I wanted to look in a little bit more into what were some reasons for conflict within Agile and how we can better respond to conflict and those things that create conflict so that we can avoid them or deal with them properly. Celestia, can you go? I don't know if I can control the slide or if it's, I'll just say slide forward. Okay. So agility in any in the business sense requires open communication from really everybody that's involved with a project. And in order to remain agile, the conflicts that come up have to be resolved very quickly. If we get stuck with a conflict, any sort of conflict really, lack of information, desire to not change, a friction towards a decision, those things can really turn the agility of a project into a tailspin. And so very often we need to look for the sources of that conflict. And in almost every case, these conflicts stem from friction that's created by misalignment, meaning within a development team, within a project team where you have stakeholders, if there's misalignment between anyone towards what solutions should be or what values are, though that misalignment is going to lead to conflicts, and those conflicts, if they're not dealt with quickly, can cause a lot of issues. Can you go forward a slide? Okay, so most of the issues that I've noticed have come from a lack of communication. A lot of the conflict happens because one person or multiple people think or feel one way, and there are other people who feel differently, and that is not communicated and resolved. So the longer that is a going situation, that communication, the lack of communication and the lack of resolution creates stronger and stronger conflicts. So these conflicts can come from different perspectives, which is something we value when we're dealing with it in an agile development situation. We want to have all those different perspectives represented. And because there's different perspectives, if the difference in viewpoint is not communicated, then that lack of communication leads to additional conflict. Different levels of experience or different experiences. And again, that's something that we value. Having teams that are built up of people who have different skills, different experience sets is something that can lead to better solutions. But because people come from different experiences, they may not have the same frame of reference, and that lack of frame of reference congruence is something that leads to additional conflict. And so one of the best ways to get past that is to focus on what is known, and I spelled that wrong, not what is believed. In some cases, if that'll be from a lack of knowledge and believing something about, let's say it's about a technology stack. There may be part of that technology stack that we're going to be working with that I don't know about. And if I don't focus on what I know and ask those questions about what I don't know and just go off of assumptions, it leads to conflicts, and it also leads to not building solutions that are based on fact. And that usually leads to massive breakdowns. Another one is different backgrounds. Because people come from different backgrounds, and that can be social backgrounds, that can be educational backgrounds, that can be really any experience that would affect or shade somebody's decision making, that those backgrounds, and it's impossible to have an entire group that has exactly the same background. So this is really one of the things that you cannot avoid. One of the best things to do in a situation where where people have are coming from multiple backgrounds that they're affecting their decision making. Context needs to be shared so that it can lead to constructive communication. Reasoning behind, and very often this has to come from a place of vulnerability. I experienced this led to this, and it ruined things for me. Let's not do that. There's a sharing that has to happen in order to have that clear context for where you're coming from to be communicated. And then we have different comfort levels. Very often you'll have different levels of comfort with certain technologies or certain decisions, or even where this project is going. Am I comfortable with what we're trying to work towards? And those things have to be communicated openly. And if you can, and if you communicate those things well to your team, it leads to a state of trust. They have the information that they need about where you're coming from. You understand why they didn't understand what you were saying, and coming at it with that open communication creates that trust, and you can move forward. Even if you don't agree, you can move forward when you have that trust. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. Another issue is that when people don't understand each other, it creates more conflicts. Facts really matter. If we're trying to understand things and you are gathering different facts than I am gathering, and we have not gathered the same information, and the information we've gathered doesn't agree, then it turns into an issue. So we need to gather those facts early and share them openly and quickly. As soon as a new piece of information comes, find the best way to communicate that to everybody that's involved. Sharing that understanding makes a huge difference. When we have open communication and all that pertinent information is available to everybody who's involved in decision making or involved in the work, it reduces the amount of conflicts that will arise just because everybody is standing on solid, factually based ground. And then lastly here, uncovering context behind positions can drive alignment. Oh, you feel that way because of this. Oh, I can understand that. I can get behind you on that. And it makes it so that you can align as a team, even with people who don't have the same experience and the same background as you. Okay, next slide. Okay, one of the things that I liked the most about this talk was the engagement cycle that he presented. And I saw this as being something that can constantly build upon itself. So from the very beginning, the level of trust you have can create a feeling of safety within the team and with the people that you're interacting with. And then when you feel safe, that safety leads to a willingness to be more vulnerable, to be open. Maybe it's a lack of knowledge. Do you want to ever communicate to somebody who you're working with that you have a lack of knowledge? Well, if you don't trust them and you don't feel safe, you won't want to do that. And that's actually going to hinder the progress of the team. And so that willingness to be vulnerable makes it so that you can move forward from things that you'd be perhaps nervous about sharing to other people. When you have that vulnerability, then you can communicate authentically to people. You're not editing the words coming out of your own mouth as you're trying to communicate things. You can just say exactly what you feel, exactly what you think, exactly where things are coming from. And that speeds up your communication and the value and the truthfulness of your communication. And when you communicate authentically and that's reciprocated throughout the team, that reinforces the trust of the entire team, and that builds upon itself. Now, the other part that he talked about was the downward spiral that can go from this not working, and that starts out with a lack of trust. When you don't trust people, you fear them. When you fear people, you become defensive. And when you are defensive, it leads to solitude, where you try to do things by yourself and you have a bunch of people pulling in very many different directions, which leads to a complete lack of progress. Okay, next slide. So one of the things that we can do in order to just look at personally things that we can do with our own communication in order to make sure that it can help build that cycle is to think before we speak and think about what we're going to say. Think about how we're going to communicate that. If we're thinking ahead of the time that our mouth is open, it could be that right now in this meeting is not the time to communicate it. Or maybe the thing that I'm going to say, it would be best if the entire team were there so that I can communicate it clearly to everybody instead of doing it multiple times. Think about the venue and how you're going to enter into that conversation. And think about if it's constructive or if it's destructive. In some cases, you're going to hurt somebody's feelings. And if hurting their feelings doesn't move towards a better outcome for the team, it doesn't really have a good value. So when he talked about think, which was an acronym for making sure that the things you say are true, that they're helpful, that they inspire, that they're necessary, and that they're kind. And if we can keep things within that framework, it makes it so that we can lead to better open communication, and that open communication leads to reduced conflicts. Okay, next slide. Okay, these are some tips on ways to reduce conflict, and you'll find that most of these are also tips on how to have more clear and open communication. First off, as much as possible, meet face to face. And that doesn't mean that you have to be exactly face to face. Right now, we're in a situation where we can be video face to face. But you want to have as many avenues of communication open. So it could be that while I'm talking about something, somebody is making a face that says, I don't like this, or a face that says, I don't know if I'm coming from a place of understanding with this conversation. If we don't have two-way communication while we're talking, then we miss out on a lot of things that are never said. And that open communication is hindered by reducing the quality of our communication. Next is to focus on what is right, not who is right. This is especially important on our teams, that we go forward looking for the best solution and what is correct, not who we think should make the solution and why we think they are correct. And it's a subtle shift, and it may actually lead to the same movements, but doing it one way versus the other makes it so that you build the team rather than causing issues on the team. The next one is to assume positive intent. And this has to come from a place of trust again, but if we can always assume that the reason somebody is nervous about going forward with something is because they want the best outcome, not because they're trying to hinder the project. And if you change, it may be that their actions don't change at all, but assuming that their action is a positive action makes it so that you can do a lot better with communicating to them and valuing what their communication back to you is. The next is trying to define what success is going to look like. If we're having a conflict, that instead of having the conflict about a certain thing that we're working on now, let's talk about how this is going to look when we're done with it, and then work back from that to what we're deciding now. If this is going to be what happens, how does that flavor the decision that we're currently making? And then the last one is one of complete vulnerability, and that is to own your own errors, and for the team to own the errors that they make. It makes it so that you can move past them. After you own something, you can go past it. Otherwise, it's something that can return and return and return, and it can create conflicts even in future projects if you don't own up on those things as soon as they happen and move forward. Those are some of the best ideas that I got out of the talk that I enjoyed the most, and I hope that helps you a little bit with reducing some of the conflicts or making an environment where those conflicts are less likely to occur.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Okay, next up is me. And I did not get my slides updated because I updated the other slides and then didn't get mine. So I'm going to talk through, in general, I don't have necessarily slides to follow along, but I'm going to talk about my favorite presentation of the conference, and that was by Jamie Champagne. And she talked about the awesome, amazing, and adventurous world of Agile analysis. So a lot of her presentation really followed along with the IIBA's Agile Analysis certification. So this is a newer certification that came out recently, or came out about 2 years ago now, I think it's been. So with the Agile Analyst certification, it really talks about, let me show my camera again, really talks about and focuses on the role of a business analyst in an Agile project. A lot of people, when the Agile Manifesto came out, said, well, you know, in Agile, we have, you know, or Agile Scrum particularly, you know, we've got a product owner, a product manager, and a development team. So, you know, we don't need BAs anymore. And the fact is that with Agile, the BA really falls under that development team. And along with the role of development, that includes business analysis. It includes quality assurance, you know, QA. It includes design, other things like that as part of the development effort and part of the development team working together to build a product. So she talks about having an Agile mindset, and really that is a lot of what the Agile Analyst certification talks about, is how to have an Agile mindset. To have an Agile mindset, we focus on delivering value constantly, collaborating continuously, iterating to learn, considering context and adapting to realities, reflecting on feedback, and producing high quality products. So these are the things that we try to focus on, and having the mindset around these particular items help us to really be able to accomplish these items I just talked about and really ultimately deliver that high quality product. Agile analysis includes things such as backlog analysis, requirements analysis, solutions evaluations, retrospectives, and time with our customers. And that includes any time that we spend with our customers, whether it's gathering requirements, whether it is including them in meetings, whether it is having demos, retros, anything that interacts with the customer falls to create a product, falls under this Agile analysis field. So Agile analysis really is broken down into 4 categories. The first one is that Agile mindset that we just talked about. The other 3 are really are a little bit more time boxed. So there's 3 different, they call them horizons. There's a strategy horizon, an initiatives horizon, and a delivery horizon. And these are also iterative within Agile. So we start with the strategy horizon, and I'll go into each of these individually a little bit and touch on them, but we have the strategy horizon where we're really kind of coming up with that initial strategy. And once we have that strategy, then we move into the initiative horizon. And at any time, if we get into the initiative horizon and we realize that we're missing some things, we circle back to that strategy horizon. And these things kind of, you know, loop back and forth, and we can switch from one horizon to the next and go back and forth as needed to deliver a project and to remain agile. In the strategy horizon, we focus on developing and maintaining a product backlog and capabilities, and we ask questions like what is worth our time? So what is the need here? And is it worth it to launch an entire project? The strategy phase really focuses on on using several techniques such as identifying the MVP. So trying to figure out what the minimum viable product is that we can deliver that is usable software, and then what can we add to that MVP. And sometimes a project can be MVP, or the project can start with MVP and then we continue on to delivery. It includes things like planning, roadmaps, purpose alignment, value stream mapping, things like that in the strategy when we're strategizing for a product. We then move into the initiative horizon. And in the initiative horizon, we're looking at the scope of the MVP. What's going to be included in that minimum viable product. We look at things like estimating and prioritizing the features, coming up with our epics, our user stories, going from epic level to the user story, or at least feature list level of detail in our requirements. We're reviewing outcomes. We're asking the question, are we still delivering value? So in the strategy horizon, we're questioning what is the value that what is the need that we're trying to fulfill. The initiative, we're making sure that we're still delivering value and what we're coming up with as we're creating these artifacts. And then we continue to change, we continue the project. We make changes as needed, and then we always look back at, again, are we delivering value, and do we need to go back and reevaluate? So we're constantly evaluating at each horizon. Are we doing the right thing? Are we on the right track? And are we providing value? Some of the techniques in the initiative horizon include things like coming up with personas, planning workshops and requirements gathering, or additional requirements gathering, retrospectives, story mappings, backlog management, data modeling, things like this, when we're really getting this project, figuring out how we are going to complete the product and the project. We then move to the delivery horizon. In the delivery horizon, we are looking at the product increment backlog, iteration planning, and this is where we're doing the actual development. So at this point, we've done the strategy, we've created the project, we at least have enough to get the project going. We have that epic level and feature list level knowledge of what needs to be built, and we're moving into that really detailed, granular level of just building out the product. This is where we do show and tell with the customer, where we do regular demos at the end of each sprint or iteration. We do iterative releases. So those can be with milestones. Those iterations can be milestones with several sprints in an iteration to complete a milestone, or the iterations can simply be the sprints of which we are just continuing to develop, demo, and create the product. In this horizon, we look at, do we have enough to deliver? Have we covered off on everything we needed? Are we missing anything? And ultimately, at the end, are we ready to deliver this product? And if the answer is no to that, then we need to identify those gaps, get those prioritized, and continue the delivery process until that's ready, the delivery horizon. Some of the skill sets that we and kind of thoughts that we can ask ourselves in the delivery horizon are, can I ensure user stories are ready for implementation? Am I helping to maintain the backlog? Am I enabling the delivery of a valuable solution? Am I continuously learning throughout the delivery cycle? And can I maintain focus on the product vision, customer, and value? In summary, this presentation helped to define Agile analysis and what it looks like today. It provided an understanding of the mindset required of analysis work in Agile environments, and helped identify techniques and approaches for successfully performing Agile analysis work. All right, thank you for letting me share that part. It really was a great presentation, and this is something that I am very passionate about, for those of you who know me. And so if you do have any other questions on this, for me, I do have all of our contact information at the end of the presentation that you can reach out to us as well. Okay, so next up we have David Hogue, who will be presenting on navigating a crisis with business agility in SAFE. And the presenter was Dean Leffingwell. So go ahead, David.
Thank you. So this presentation was actually a case study that was presented by Scaled Agile, who is the owner or the holder of SAFE, which is the Scaled Agile framework. And Dean Leffingwell is one of their key methodologists. So they were talking about in this presentation of how they were able to adjust to the crisis of COVID in specific. So it was really relevant to what they were doing. Just to give you a quick background so that you can understand what they were working for, SAFE is the Scaled Agile framework. They deal in areas of lean, agile, and DevOps, and they put a little bit of framework around that as you implement agile into your organization to manage change. They focus on some 5 core competencies, which include your team and technology agility, which in this case of this business model or this case study was their business agility. They also talk about the DevOps and the release on demand, business solutions and lean systems engineering, lean portfolio management, and lean agile leadership. And so as I walk through this a little bit, we'll kind of cover what those look like as they did this transition that they went through. So go ahead to the next slide. Maybe. Oh, there we go. All right, while we're working on that, let me just kind of cover a little bit of what the next slides will go over. There was a book that was published a few years back by Carlotta Perez, which talked about technological revolutions. And this was kind of the lead in that Dean was using to talk about their case study. And one of the examples they gave was, back when the automotive industry first came online, they were inundated with numerous companies that were building cars. And they went through what they call the installation period, where hundreds of different options and models and organizations existed. And then they reach what's the turning point, based on what Carlotta was presenting in her book. And this is where they either have to conform or adjust or change to beat the market demands. And this is where most companies get weeded out. And then we go into what's considered the development period. Go ahead and switch to the next slide. So in the case of Scaled Agile, we are in the Agile software development age, is what they're calling it. And it talks about, we've seen over the last 30, 40 years, 50 years, how many different tech companies come into this industry, make an impact, and then disappear. As we walked through what they would consider this installation period. And as the turning point occurred, they classified that turning point as right around the turn of the century. My personal opinion is we're probably still in this turning point. There's so much transition and stuff going on still. There's not really been a stabilization. And I don't know that we ever will reach a stabilization in this age, but they talked about how they are now transitioning into this deployment period. And you can see their nice little graphic of the COVID there, and how they just recently adapted to this change. And that's what this whole case study was about. So let's jump into the next slide. So this was a great quote. So this is John Cotter. He wrote a book called Accelerate, XLR8. And one of the quotes that came out of this is, "The solution is not to trash what we know and start over, but instead to reintroduce a second system, one of which would be familiar to most successful entrepreneurs. And you need a dual operating system." And this was the real crutch of the whole case study, is that Scaled Agile, the organization, didn't go out and scrap everything they had. They didn't start their whole idea of safe over, or even their hierarchy of their company. They made adjustments within that and did what they call adding a dual operating system, where they used SAFE, their own product, to manage the crisis. So let's jump into the next slide. So this is kind of their business model, and there's a little bit more detail to this. I pulled this simplified slide to make it as simple as I could. But you'll see on the hierarchy side that you have the efficiency and stability of what a hierarchy within an organization brings. And that structure provides stability. And that's why we don't want to just scrap it and say, hey, we're not agile. We need to go to this whole free-for-all methodology. That's not really the point of what Agile is about. And sometimes that's a misunderstanding in the industry of Agile. But there is a real drive to be able to push towards speed of innovation and utilizing a customer-centric mentality around your networks. And so within this process, you have two operating systems. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. So the driver to the whole problem, or the whole case study, was that Scaled Agile had to adjust. Prior to COVID, their whole business model was, we will go all over the world. We'll meet with companies. We'll meet with people who want to certify or whatever it is in the SAFE framework. And we will invite them into these conferences or whatever. And we'll have these hands-on, in-person conferences, training sessions, certification areas. And obviously in the new world, that just isn't feasible anymore. And so they had to go through a very fast and streamlined change process to move their content to remote learning and online certifications to a scale that they had not had before. You know, there was always the online presentation here or there, but that wasn't their real business model. It wasn't what they were trying to do. And so it talks about in this case study how they went from, prior to March, all of these remote areas, a lot of expenditures, to post-March, where they had cut back on all the conference expenses, discretionary funds, but had also added content to their program by adding up to, I think they said it was 35 different courses as options for people online to take and to learn more about the SAFE framework. In doing so, they were able to streamline their finances and stabilize their company quickly to where they forecast that they will be around for a long time, which will be good. This is a growing technology or a growing framework in the Agile world. And so the case study talked about how this continuous learning organization is what they were driving towards with the business agility that we talked about in that earlier slide. This was one of the most persistent and in the end the most valuable management paradigms that they went through as part of their SAFE, using their own tool to make themselves a more stable company. All right, next slide. So this was the hallmark of the quote, the best quote of the day, I thought, or in the presentation. The problem is not with organizations realizing that they need to transform. The problem is that organizations are using managerial frameworks and infrastructure models from past revolutions to manage their businesses in this one, meaning this current age. And so that goes back to that Carlotto Perez book of all those different ages. And we see this in the world of project management, business analysts, organizations that live in the business model that they started back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and yet they're trying to compete in the digital age and be able to rapidly transform their organizations. And, you know, the point of this whole presentation was, don't scrap everything and try and start over. Make sure that you take what works for you, but then add in that second operating system that'll give you the agility to move forward and to change with the markets. And that's how you'll survive that transformation period. So this was a fantastic presentation. I've watched it a couple of times. There's actually a couple in here that I've watched multiple times, but this was really a great case model that showed the effectiveness of Agile and the scaled Agile process, the framework there. So that's what I have. Thanks.
Thanks, David. All right, so next we'll move over to Tim Oversall, and we are at quarter two. So we'll have Tim go for 5-10 minutes, and then we'll try to still leave a few minutes at the end, at least for Q&A. So Tim, do you want to share your screen to present your slides?
Yes, please. Can I present?
I will stop sharing, and you can take control.
All right. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Andy, Celestia, and David. I got a lot out of your discussions. The reason I chose this topic, getting meaningful user feedback on designs, is that I am assigned a new project that I'm supposed to spin up and help people. And I had a presentation yesterday to get us started. And this presentation helped me with my current job. So I appreciated that. Renee Lycan was the speaker of this. And I realized there was going to be 4 speakers. So I've got some quick slides that we'll go through very quickly. And I won't read everything to you. I'll just summarize some of it. One-on-one sessions are the best way to get quality feedback. And she gave us some key bullet points here on how to get feedback. Decide what features you want feedback on. Give the user context and background knowledge to build a mindset before they get started. Give the user one task to accomplish. Keep the scenario short. And use realistic data in your scenario. Let me give you a quick example of that, and I'll end on this slide. So she gives the context by saying, imagine that you're looking to travel to Denver for your sister's baby shower tomorrow morning. So you're getting in the mindset, okay, it's a baby shower. You want to be there earlier to set up food and decorations. So you're flying out today. That's the context. Then I'm going to skip down to the other yellow. It says, use this application you've learned about through NMT Airlines to get your boarding passes and get checked in. And it says there, provide the user with a task to accomplish. So this is the task that you want them to do, is check in. But notice she used NMT Airlines. She used a specific name. It's a made-up name, but it's a tangible name rather than say, oh, pretend it's your favorite grocery store, or pretend it's your favorite airline, or it's some app. Give it a name, give it specifics so that they can focus in on what you're talking about, and then prepare the user to interact. Okay, you open the app to check in, and this is what you see. What are you going to do next? And that's what I did yesterday in my presentation. I would start off very similar to this, and this was very helpful. And I'd say, okay, now what do you expect to see? And boy, the floodgates opened, and it really, really helped. I tried not to lead them in different directions, the direction that I wanted. I tried to find out what they expected. And that was the key of this discussion with Renee. And I very much enjoyed it because I used it and applied it in yesterday's discussion. And here's another example. Again, she starts out with context, a task to accomplish, and prepare the user for interaction. So that's all I want to present. We're on time. Let me turn the mic back over to someone else, more important than I.
Thanks, Tim. All right. Let me go ahead and get back to our slide here. All right, so now we'll move on to the Q&A portion. I had the slide here to kind of summarize the conference and Q&A. I guess we can start by asking if there are questions, and then we can kind of end with our summary if there's time of kind of how we felt about the conference. So let's open it up. Are there any questions? Does anybody have any questions or comments on what you've heard today or on the conference in general? Anybody can ask questions if they have them. Okay, well, we will leave this time open if you have questions, but let's maybe just do another quick roundtable and have each of the presenters just kind of summarize how they felt the conference was overall. So Andy, what were your kind of summarized overall thoughts of the conference?
I actually was going through the preparations and the taking of the Agile analysis certification at the time that this conference became available. And I really enjoyed how topical almost all of the content that I went through was for most of it spoke directly to things that were parts of the certification for Agile analysis. And it really helped me to understand that there were so many real world examples of things that I was trying to understand in a conceptual form that it really helped me to understand a lot of those. I really appreciated the clarity that it brought to real world, whereas in a lot of cases it was more just kind of a map framework on some of the pages of this book that I was reading to becoming something that I could really understand and relate to.
That's great. Thanks, Andy. David, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I thought the conference was incredibly insightful in the current issues that are going on. There were so many case studies, so many models that they talked about, like Andy was just saying. But, I was actually torn over what to present today. There was actually another fantastic one about the Toyota Kata and how that, I was that close to presenting that one instead of the safe one. But the value of Agile in this era was very well portrayed, and opportunities on how we can keep relevant and change and have this mindset of agility was very well presented throughout this whole conference. So I really liked it.
Thanks,
Really
David.
I really like this for several reasons. I can see people in the industry using what I'm doing and how they're being successful. That was very helpful. Again, I need to say that it was very helpful to have this online so I could review the messages several times and rewind and replay and do screen captures of some of their slides. It was very nice and well put together. I like the homepage that had the different booths and briefcases and all the things that you could do in there to see all the talks.
And just one last point, it was really nice to get all of the PDUs we need to renew all of our certifications. So I'm all set to renew my CSM already. So it's great.
That's great. All right. Yeah, that was definitely another great feature was being able to get those another thing was really great to get those PDUs that go toward, now the Scrum Alliance requires, a whole recertification process to be a certified Scrum Master, certified, product owner, all of those. And so they do require those education credits in order to recertify, which wasn't a thing before. So while we have just a minute, I did want to show, can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, so this is the online conference here. And so you can see it's kind of like you walk into the conference. Here's the big keynote speaker presentation room here. You've got the help center and kind of a resource library here and videos up here and a user guide. And you've got a lounge area where you can network with other people. There's exhibitors in here for the exhibit hall. Place to get badges and win prizes, things like that. So, and then, sponsors and things. So it just was a really cool UI, how they had that all put together as well, I thought. So
I really hope to see more conferences use this. It was so efficient.
Yeah, it was really cool. I really did like it. It was that really honestly was, one of the things that I liked a lot about the conference, as well as so much wonderful, useful information. So again, if you were not able to attend the conference and you're able, it really was relatively inexpensive for the amount of knowledge that you can gain from this conference. If you do have any questions, please reach out to any of us presenters, let us know, and any one of us would be happy to share more on the conference. So with that, just a few minutes left. Are there any questions for the group? Okay, well, we will go ahead and wrap up there. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.
See you all.
Thanks.